I always say garbage in, garbage out. If you're not putting the right information in and using the software as it's intended, you're not going to get the great reports out of it.
Welcome to Builders, Budgets, and Beers. I'm Reece Barnes, and I started this podcast to have real conversations about money in the building industry, the wins, the mistakes, and everything in between. I believe builders deserve to feel confident about their finances, and that starts by hearing from others who've been through it too. This industry can be slow to change, but the right stories and the right tools can make profitability feel possible. Let's get into it. Alrighty, mics are hot, Aimee. We're rolling. Thanks so much for jumping on Builders, Budgets, and Beers.
Excited to be here.
Yes. Okay, sweet. So everybody, we have Aimee Roden here, construction bookkeeper extraordinaire. Aimee, go ahead and introduce yourself and give the audience a little background on who you are, your experience in the space, and we'll start the conversation there.
Okay. I have been a bookkeeper for years. Started out in the restaurant industry.
Can I ask how many years, Aimee?
Yeah, over 20.
Over a couple decades.
Over 20 years. Yeah.
Okay.
Stumbled.
Cool. Started in hospitality restaurant.
Started in hospitality restaurant, family business, and took it from there. And I actually have a legal background prior to that, which helps me in life and business, which is great.
Totally.
But then as I started doing bookkeeping, I was introduced to a construction client. They have since retired, but they were one of my favorite clients, and I really loved doing construction. It's a lot of nuances to it. So deal with a lot of different industries and businesses, although I said construction is my favorite. I'm also a certified QuickBooks Pro advisor and a certified bookkeeper.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. You're credentialed. You're more than qualified. Real quick, before we jump into this, you said that you were introduced to a construction client. How far into your journey were you when you got introduced to them?
Oh gosh, we are going back at probably 10, 15 years.
Okay.
So kind of in the beginning of my bookkeeping career, I was introduced to their accountant and actually got interviewed by the accountant to see that I was qualified to work with them. And then I started working with them. And I've also worked with this accountant for a long time. And it was a couple of brothers who had been in the construction industry doing, big home remodels. And I was their, full charge bookkeeper, took over for another bookkeeper who was moving out of state in Connecticut, and she was moving to Arizona. And I was with them until they retired. Yep.
I love that. And then you go ahead.
No, I said they retired and they moved down south and said, I had enough, and they were,
That's what they did.
Yeah, that's what they did.
That was it. That's beautiful. You mentioned that it was your favorite type of accounting. Mm-hmm. Why do you love it? Because construction accounting is extremely nuanced. What did you find to love in construction accounting?
It is. So one of the things when I started with construction and learned about it was job costing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a certain kind of bookkeeping you have to do where a lot of people don't think about it. And the accountant I worked with, she specialized in construction. So it was every time you enter something into QuickBooks, it has to be associated with a job, your customer. So your client, your customer, whoever you're doing the job on. So you can run your financials based on that customer. So that's how you can do your job costing. Say, am I making money on this client? Am I losing money on this client? So everything is associated with a customer. So in traditional bookkeeping, you're not always entering the customer for different types of jobs, industries. But with construction, that's really important, is to have everything coded not only to the specific account or product and service, which is the more detailed that rolls up to your accounts, but the customer, you got to have it to the customer. So
wait, so you're telling me that that's unique to construction, is that you weren't job costing in the hospitality space? You weren't job costing lettuce to burgers to client?
No. And most industries were not doing that kind of job costing that you're doing in construction. Yeah.
Totally. I love it. Okay. So you fell in love with job costing with, okay. I love it. Now to get back on track here a little bit.
Mhm.
I'm going to ask you a question, which we could probably riff on that, but I'm going to ask you a question and we'll base the conversation based off your answer. Okay.
Mhm.
So with that said, in your perspective or from your point of view, what is the one conversation that needs to be had more in the construction accounting world that isn't being had enough?
Proper coding
Okay.
and good billing. The
And
two.
billing, accounts
Billing.
receivable. Okay.
Accounts receivable, proper coding and billing, getting that billing out timely so you can
Yeah.
get paid.
Totally.
You
Okay.
gotta
So
get
this
paid.
is in the same vein. It's coding, it's
Yeah.
billing. Okay. Now,
Yeah.
why? Why do you have such a perspective, or why do you think that that's the conversation that needs to be had?
Well, so a lot of mistakes construction companies make, is they bloat their chart of accounts and they
Okay.
think the coding needs to be in the chart of accounts. That's your
Mhm.
higher level information. Your
Mhm.
coding, your real coding for construction is your products and services. In the old desktop world, it was known as items. So that's
Yep.
your detail. So I work with my guys now at Quindico, and I do all the AIA forms, all the AI billing.
Mhm.
So we use our awesome software that we love, Adaptive. Everything goes into Adaptive,
Yeah.
syncs to QuickBooks, but it's all based on the coding, which ties into our AIA forms. And
Mhm.
it's how we convey the information to the client and what's going through the architects.
Mhm.
So they have all that information readily available to them. What are we billing on the job to the budget?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
it's just so important doing that coding and getting it done timely, when all the vendor and subcontractor bills come in. So we get the bills out to the client and get paid and just kind of keep that machine going.
Totally. Totally. Okay. And so you mentioned at the very beginning that contractors believe that, we'll call them their cost codes,
Yeah,
need to be built at the chart of accounts level. You're talking about Intuit product verbiage
correct.
being product and service or
Yeah,
item.
that's
Why
correct.
not? Why not build your cost codes into the chart of accounts? And
Yeah.
why bucket them into product and service as opposed to
Yeah.
chart of accounts? I
A
get it.
lot of people do that, whether it's construction or any other industry. They just bloat their chart of accounts. Too
Okay.
much information. You don't need all that information in your chart of accounts. So your
Okay.
chart of accounts will give you everything flows through your chart of accounts, and that's going to give you your profit and loss
Mhm.
and your balance sheet. And those two
Mhm.
reports will show everything about your business. But
Mhm.
when you're looking at those reports, if you have all this detail in it, it's bloated, it's just overwhelming. So a
Mhm.
lot of people don't know about the software. And this is not just specific to QuickBooks, you got other softwares out there, but your product and service list is all your detail.
Mhm.
You have those AIA forms with all your cost codes, and the cost code list grows and grows and grows. That's going to roll up to your chart of accounts. And it's going
Right.
to be, so you're going to be more specific with your products and services, more generalized with your P&L. And you can also run those reports on your specifics as well. So you don't need it in both places. Sometimes people make that mistake too. They have their product and service list mirrored in their chart of accounts. They're like the exact same.
Right.
And you don't need to do that. And you don't want to do that.
Totally. So this is very common. I'm glad that we're talking about this
Very
because this
common. I've cleaned it
is
up
a
many
very
times.
exactly. And from my understanding, correct me if wrong, but usually like when you could get to the core of the why that
Mm-hmm.
decision was made, why cost codes are found in the chart of accounts is because of a misunderstanding of what the intention of the chart of account is versus what the intention of the cost code is. And then it typically rolls into a reporting, right? It's like a
Correct.
lot of these, we'll call them ERPs or
Mm-hmm.
general ledger softwares like a QuickBooks or a Sage or Foundation, right?
Yep.
Some of them are better than others at the construction accounting side of things, right?
Correct.
So usually that confusion starts with using a more horizontal product like a QuickBooks. Horizontal meaning it's industry agnostic. You can use it for restaurants, you can use it for construction companies, you can use it for retail, whatever, right? So then they try and build their cost codes into their chart of accounts thinking that they're reviewing a P&L and that's going to show them the health of their jobs, when that it will at a high level, but it's not in the granular detail that they're trying to understand. So I guess a long way of going through this is it generally comes from a point of confusion or seeking reporting that they aren't thinking about thoroughly. Do you agree, disagree? And I might have made that more confusing than it needs to be. But what's your general take on that? Essentially, why do contractors build their cost codes into their chart of accounts as opposed to product and service?
Right. I agree with everything you said. And a lot of it has to do with they don't know what they don't know. They know their business and how they want to see it. They just don't understand the software and accounting. And they might know something about accounting, but they're not understanding the software and how it works. So, having somebody who understands the software and how it works and how it can integrate with a third-party software, because to your point, QuickBooks is more agnostic. When I first started construction, it was desktop world, and there was a specific QuickBooks geared towards construction.
Right.
But desktop is, a dinosaur now, and if you don't own it, if you don't own it now, you can't even get the desktop version. So with that being said, people just don't know what they don't know, and they don't understand, how to get the proper reports. And I always say garbage in, garbage out.
Right. Totally.
Yeah. If you're not putting the right information in, so that's back to your proper coding and using the software as it's intended, you're not going to get the great reports out of it. So if you're using the software properly and understand it, then you're going to get better reporting.
Totally.
Yeah, definitely.
Totally. Okay. Well, and so that's where, and even just to tie this back. So when you're thinking of the chart of accounts, and actually, let me take a step back even further. I think just for like the general audience here, think of your cost codes as like the most granular level of categorization that you're going to get. That's your 1010 building permit. That's your footings, foundations. That's your drywall, all that stuff that you're going to be coding costs too.
Right.
And then those codes would roll into a chart of accounts, typically your cost of goods sold.
Yes, correct.
Your COGS. Okay. And then that COGS with all of your cost codes rolling up into the cost of goods sold code, that's going to reflect on your P&L. That's going to reflect on your balance sheet. And then when you want to drill in more granularly to why are our COGS so much higher and why is it showing a 5% net instead of a 10% net, right? Then you can start going into seeing where was your cost bleed, where was this on a different report. It's not that you're going to drill in on the P&L, it's that you're going to drill in on your job cost reporting.
Exactly. So you're going to say, okay, I'm going to have my plumbing on my AIA form, and you're going to have, plumbing fixtures, plumbing this, whatever. And then it might roll up to your cost of goods sold where you're just going to have plumbing. So typically for my construction guys, we have a cost of goods sold really high level, just plumbing, HVAC, electrical, have it that simple. And then so all your granular stuff in those categories will roll up to your chart of accounts. So you say, okay, where did I spend my money on my P&L? And then I want to see the granular level in my product and service, because you can run a report based on product and services. And then if you start to use other softwares that do better reporting, even like Adaptive with a WIP report, work in progress. Where am I at? Where am I at with my budget? How much am I going over budget on a line item? Because typically with the AI forms and billing, which a lot of contractors I hate AI billing, but this is what's, known in the industry and what people use. And, they wait on the billing, they procrastinate on the billing. And the next thing you know, you got like a stack like this, you got a code. And, but if you know where you're at and you're looking at this report in front of you, it's going to make your life easier when you're coding, so you're saying, okay, I've used up my budget on electrical, and a lot of time we, borrow from Peter to pay Paul, especially if we're doing fixed price. We've used up our budget on electrical, but we've got all this stuff on site work that we haven't used and we may not use. So we're going to, stick it over here.
Right.
So
Okay.
that's where the magic starts to happen with the coding, that everybody thinks, oh, I got to stick everything in this budget, in this line item, but then you've used it up. So now
Yeah.
what do I do? But if
Right.
you don't have that information in front of you, you're like, where do I put it?
Totally. Okay. And so you're talking about AIA billing quite a
Mhm.
bit and the relation to
Mm.
the importance of coding.
Yep.
Okay. First, well, I guess rather second, I want you to bridge that gap of like the
Mhm.
relationship between coding and accounts receivable or billing. But first, you mentioned that people hate AIA billing. Why? Why? Like,
A lot
and
of
this could
people,
be a whole episode. This could be a whole episode, but go ahead.
yeah, a lot of people don't like AI billing, but it's what's used in the industry, especially for bigger
Right.
jobs.
Yep.
So some smaller contractors may not use it. So when we get our billing from, our vendors and subcontractors, some of them use it,
Mm-hmm.
and some people don't always understand it. And it's understanding how the AIA form works. Um,
Okay.
but that's typically if you're dealing with a budget and fixed price and understanding how you get your coding in there. Um, but yeah, people just start to put things on the back burner with coding. And that's why, I was always looking for, how can we make this easier?
Mm-hmm.
How can we make this process easier for, the PMs coming in who are doing the coding, they're on the job, because then it comes to us in the back office with the accounting to get it all through, to get the bills out.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and I just want to make sure I'm understanding like
Yeah.
the friction point. So, and this could be the second part of that question, which was like
Mhm.
tie AIA billing
Yep.
back to coding. But like, are you essentially suggesting that there are construction companies out there that call it cost plus or even fixed price?
Mhm.
You can use
Mhm.
AIA for
Yep.
either,
Yep.
right? But they're just going to be invoicing or building their accounts receivable without coded costs.
Yeah. Some of them, I mean, we get bills
I
coming in from subcontractors that are in an email.
right, and
You
there's
don't even
there's like
have
no
any.
internal categorization. Go ahead.
No, yeah, exactly. It might come in with just an email and it doesn't have a whole lot of information on it. We'll go back to them sometimes saying, "Oh, can you redo this?" So it's more clear.
Yeah.
And I would say the bookkeeping is as good on our end as it is on the other end.
Right.
So not only do we have to watch what we're doing, we got to watch what everybody else is doing
Right.
uh, to keep them, on top of it and ask for the right information. And another thing that people do, progress billing. That's
Yep.
another thing in construction that people get tripped up on, and how the billing comes in. Yeah, it might
Totally.
be, they might bill for, like, let's say, 25% of the job, and that 25% didn't get paid. They'll send you another bill with 50%. So now you got two invoices in the system, one with 25, one with 50, but they're duplicates in a sense. So you got to
Right.
watch out for that stuff too.
Interesting. Yeah, totally. Okay. And like even just to go back, so how I don't so it's essentially there's like we just have costs, the invoice coming in.
Yep.
We aren't coding it. So
Yep.
we don't necessarily know A, what this is doing to our estimate versus actual, but
Yep.
even B, like how are we performing against what we had thought we could bill against that line item or
Mm-hmm.
cost code. Right. So then like what's the outcome? The outcome is holding your breath to the end of the job to see if you made money or what? Essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're not tracking it properly, absolutely. Yeah. And that's the whole point of coding and doing the billing, whether you're doing AI billing or not. I mean, if you're
Yeah.
using software and you're just putting out like a nice invoice, just saying to the client, okay, this is my material cost, this is my labor cost, and and you get that out there. If you have nothing to compare it to, and you're not really doing stuff in your system, how do you know where you're going if you don't know where you've been?
Totally. Totally. So I feel like it just even in your world, like over 20 years of
Yeah.
experience, I can't imagine the explanation or the education of this concept to contractors is 100%. I imagine you have to pull some teeth. What is that like trying to explain the importance of this to contractors that haven't been doing it?
For people who haven't been doing it, I think it's hitting on the pain points
Okay.
and how to solve those pain points. And I don't think they realize how much money they may be leaving on the table.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
they don't know what they don't know because they don't see it. They don't know that they may have paid somebody twice for something. They overpaid. And then once you've paid somebody, try and get that money back.
Of
Good luck.
course. Yeah. Yeah. Good luck. Yeah. Totally.
And I've
Totally.
seen it.
Well,
Yeah.
and this is where those like horror stories come out of like, yeah, we closed out the job and we thought we were doing great. And then we started talking to a bookkeeper that knew construction accounting, and it looks like we're actually, underbilled by $500,000 or $1 million over a 5-year window.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, and I don't even like, do you think when people hear those stories, and they could be in the wrong, right? They might not be coding, right? They might not be tracking their billing the way they should.
Right.
Do you think that it's just like an immediate, oh, no way, that could be me? Or do you think that like, I don't know how much more loud you could get about the problem at hand?
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely a problem. When people are, especially, some of the smaller guys, they're thinking, oh, I don't have time for this. I can't do this. But, it's, we deal with subcontractors that, a job might be nearly closed out. And let's say it's now August, and we get a bill from them from like last December.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, what do you want me to do with this now? It's August. Why were you waiting on that? So I think it goes both ways, not just for, who I work with and as general construction, but all the subcontractors out there in their billing. It's still construction, whether you're a plumber, an HVAC guy,
totally.
So it's just getting that stuff taken care of and staying on top of it to get that, billing out there. And so you get paid. Bottom line, it's about getting paid and not leaving money on the table.
This is where I'm just like, obviously I'm aware that this is a problem, right? That's why adaptive exists, right?
Yes.
But where's the gap between a small business plumbing company, right, doing work in December and then invoicing in August? How does that even happen? Like, like you're running a business, you have bills that are getting paid. Like, you're not taking on the risk and the stress of building a business to not get paid. You can just be an employee and not have to deal with any of this and like bank on the paycheck, right?
Right.
So it's like, what's the gap? Like, is it because invoicing is so hard for the subcontractor?
Yeah.
Like, what is it?
I think some of our smaller subcontractors, I think they can do it all themselves, and it's difficult doing everything yourself. When you're a small business owner wearing all the hats and you're trying to do the job, then you're trying to do the billing, and you're trying to get it out. And then, so you're doing billing, your accounts payable, now your accounts receivable, trying to collect, and you're going after somebody saying, hey, I sent that invoice. Why haven't I got paid on that? And it's a trickle down effect. So just understanding the importance of it, that sometimes, just do what you do well. And if you're a plumber, do what you do well. And it's worth the investment to have somebody else who does bookkeeping, accounting, who understands that and understands these softwares to get your invoicing out. It's worth that investment. Your time is better spent making money doing plumbing or HVAC than trying to do your books. And then you're not getting paid because you're not getting stuff out. So isn't it worth that investment to have somebody do it for you to get it out so you're getting paid and staying on top of it?
I don't want a tile guy doing my books.
I know.
I don't want a bookkeeper doing my tile.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah, okay. So going back into that. So is this really more of like, even from an awareness conversation? Because you'd mentioned earlier that like this really is, they don't know what they don't know, right?
Yes.
That's frankly why we do this podcast, right? Is like make construction accounting much more palatable, much more of a conversation in the industry. But do you think like this all starts with just like a lack of understanding and how they should look at hiring individuals and building their business? Because I could only imagine that a plumber doing $5 million a year in work.
Yeah.
Even like they're sitting here and they're going, who do I hire first? Someone who can produce more work that I can bill for and I can make money on, or someone who can do the administrative work to track what's going on? Like, it's not hard to guess what choice they're going to choose, right? They're going to want to hire more labor, right? Because they can bill for it. But then like at that point, it's like, okay, well now you might be paying this person, they might be creating revenue for you, but you're not grabbing the profit off of it. So how do you help them think through that process?
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head. They're not grabbing the profit because they're not getting the bills out. They're not quantifying it. They may be missing stuff like material costs. So if they themselves aren't capturing all their material costs for the job that they're submitting to the GC, now they're leaving money on the table. They
Yeah,
forgot about it. It's a lot of moving parts. I mean, the volume I see that comes through our office in paperwork, it's enormous. It's enormous.
totally.
It's a lot to keep on top of. And we used to do this stuff on spreadsheets.
Totally. There are people,
It's crazy.
believe me, still do it. They
I
still
mean,
do it.
we were using QuickBooks, but we were doing things on spreadsheets. It was crazy.
Mhm.
So I was like, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a better way. So that's when we really upped our game and introduced adaptive, and it works with QuickBooks, and we've just come so far with that. So even if you're a smaller guy, I mean, you need to invest in the mechanics behind it. It's always that thing. What makes sense to invest in your business so you can grow. If you want to grow, or even if
Totally.
you want to stay where you're at, you just want to make more money with less time. But if you're
Totally.
constantly doing all this stuff and you're trying to do something else, all the accounting and bookkeeping, and you can't stay on top of it, you know, how you sleep at night. You're thinking about,
Totally.
I didn't get that bill out. I'm leaving this money on the table. I got a bill for that job. That was, $25,000 that I need to collect, all
Right.
those kind of things.
Totally. Is that essentially like the trigger where you would advise someone to consider outsourcing or hiring someone that can do it? Is like, hey, as soon as like you're starting to feel this or have these thoughts, this is really when you should think about it. Or do you think it's more binary on like a revenue threshold or employee count or job count? Like what, like just for the audience, like how should they be thinking about this?
I think if you've got too much of it in your head and
Mhm.
you're the bottleneck in any industry, if you're the bottleneck and things are waiting to get through you, it's
Yeah.
time to implement something, whether that's a new hire for back office or delegating somebody else to, go, review the job, make sure the job's going as it should be on site.
Mhm.
I think that's when you start thinking about it. When it's just you and it's too much and it's overwhelming and you're the bottleneck, that's
Right.
a key indicator right there that it's time.
Okay. Okay. Beautiful. I think like even for, I guess, what are the size ranges of contractors that you work with from a revenue standpoint?
Oh gosh, you have. I was working with some that are like 6 million a year, 3 million a
Okay.
year, up to 35 million a year.
Okay.
Hmm.
Do you think that this problem disappears at 10 million?
No,
Or like on these $35 million contractors, are they just as at fault for these types of fundamental as we might consider them?
yeah, no, it doesn't disappear. It doesn't disappear. The problem just gets bigger. It just
Okay.
gets bigger, and it's just more volume means you need more hands in it to make sure it's working. But I think again, if you implement proper processes in place and using the things like you need to, your standard operating procedures, and using something like adaptive, that
Yeah.
it becomes wash, rinse, repeat. And so it gets easier. So even if
Yeah.
you're at a higher level and you're doing a lot more volume, it just gets easier.
Okay. Okay, interesting. And that's where even like with the like the what are some of the outcomes for like a $35 million? Like what is it? Is it just missing percentages of profit? Is it just like going blind into estimates because you have zero job costing data or not enough accurate job costing data? Like
Yeah.
what are the biggest strangleholds for those types of people?
I think some of the smaller contractors might have, or I should say not smaller, but people with not as much experience.
Mhm.
Without that data, they might struggle more with estimating a job. The
Yeah.
guys I work with they're really good at it. I mean, they keep stuff in their head because they just know the industry. They're just good
Yeah.
at it. And I'm
35-year vets. Yeah.
yeah, I'm like, God, how do you keep that in your head? And they're like, it's just because they know it and they're experienced at it. But with the
Yeah.
tool, it just makes it easier. It makes it
Yeah.
easier. So it saves time. It saves time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It saves time, adds clarity, all the
Yeah.
things that everyone wants, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
I love
And
it.
we
I
all want
love
to
it.
save time. We all want to save time. I mean, we want to save time so we can maybe like, not be working on a weekend or late at night, or, you want to go on that trip with your family that you put off, all those kind of things.
Totally. And I think even just going back like to the weekends and the
Yeah.
laying up at night, wondering what's going on. I truly don't know what more of a motivator you need. And I get it. Construction's a little bit of an antiquated industry, right? There's a lot of, badges of honor walking around because of the
Yeah.
hours of brute force that they put in,
Yep.
right? But you really do have to look, and it's like you can't miss a headline without Anthropic or OpenAI in it. Right. You
Yes.
can't miss a headline without how much of our economy is built on tech. And
Yep.
sit here on a Saturday, job costing invoices, coding stuff, trying to figure, and not be like, I'm tired of this. I
Uh-huh.
want to get my weekends back at the very least. It's wild to me.
Yeah. I mean, that's it. We want our weekends back. We all want that work-life balance, but it's how do we find that? And like you said, Anthropic, AI, it's here. It's not going
Yeah.
anywhere. I mean, we're all inundated with AI, but it's in any industry, it's not like, your job's going to be replaced, but you're going to be more efficient and you're going to be ahead of the game if you start using it like you should, and
Totally.
it's overwhelming. I mean, we're all overwhelmed by it, but if you start learning a little bit of it here and there, and you just start using something and, make that one step. Some people are like, I'm doing everything on a spreadsheet. It's like, okay, maybe you need an accounting software. Maybe you don't want to do
Right.
everything on a spreadsheet, take baby steps. But start making those steps, because if you don't start making those steps now, you're just going to be left behind, and you don't want to be
Totally.
left behind,
Totally. Do you think that as a society we have gotten better or worse with the advent of calculators?
Better or worse? I use a calculator a lot.
And the younger generation, like I remember, and when I was in elementary school, it was like no calculators, you have to know the math, right? And I get
Right.
it. Like, yes, of course, you need to know the foundations of like addition, subtraction, multiplication, stuff like that. That's frankly about where my math ended, right?
Yeah.
But there was always like no calculators. Now you're looking around, you're like, people have calculators in their pockets, and they've
Yes.
only gotten better. And it's
Yeah.
not like kids are not learning math, they're just
Yeah.
learning math with technology,
Right.
right? So it's the same concept of this, like, oh, it's going to take my job, or like, this is what I do. It's like, okay, well, you understand the fundamentals. Let the AI run the fundamentals, the low value work. And then you can take all of the experience, which I can guarantee you, if you've been in any role for over 10 years,
Mm-hmm.
administrative task work is not where you should be spending your time. Right. So
Right.
now if we let AI do that, we can start impacting the business on a much larger level with all the experience, but also you can bring the next generation into these types of tools, teach them the fundamentals faster. They understand what the AI is doing. And now we're accelerating and bettering society with a group of people that didn't have to go through the ruck march of job costing in Excel, right? And
Right.
on physical
Right.
documents. They could
Right.
they can get that step up, and they can start, leaning into controller type levels faster and CFO
Mm-hmm.
type levels faster, and they can accelerate that. So obviously I'm biased, but I think to your point of like, is this stuff scary or how do I start? Just lean in, start exploring it.
Just lean in, start exploring it. But one of the things I think about AI too is understanding it. So what I say is, don't put something into AI and then try and present it, but you don't know what it's talking about. You still
Exactly.
have to understand the concept. You still have to understand what you're presenting. So if you're
Mhm.
asking questions and you don't know what it's saying, then you're really not qualified. So use it, lean into it, and use it to make your job easier. Don't use it to, explain something you don't understand. You still need to understand it. So that's where your experience still is important. It's very
Right.
important. Yeah.
Totally. Totally. I love it. Well, this was an awesome conversation, Aimee. Do you have anything else that you would want to share with the fine contractors of America before we wrap this up? And I know I'm putting you on the spot here.
Well, I met y'all through Adaptive, and it was the only thing I think about is where we came from and where we are now. I mean,
Yeah.
we've been with 2 years now. I think it's over 2 years, and
Yeah.
how things are evolving. And to your point, like AI is coming in with new AI agents, and we're exploring that.
Yeah.
But I just had in my head, if there was something out there that could do what I hoped it would do. I was like, I just had this idea in my head. And
Mhm.
when I found it, I was like, hallelujah, this is it.
Yeah.
It was just great. And I presented it to our PM. He had to be on board because they were going to be using it. And they're like, yep, this is great. And it's just, ever since we've just been moving forward and getting better and more efficient and growing. And that's the thing, we want to grow. Everybody wants to grow and do more with and be better.
Yeah.
So it's been a really great experience. Yeah.
Okay. So the final words of the wise was an endorsement on Adaptive. I love it.
It's an endorsement.
I
It's
love it.
absolutely an endorsement, but we've been using it for quite some time. And, like I said, I
Yeah.
looked at a lot of different things out there. I get inundated by software, different softwares out there coming at me all the time. And I'm like,
Those
okay,
pesky cold callers.
a lot. And so I did a lot of demos. I kissed a
Yeah.
lot of frogs before I got the prince.
I
Yeah.
love it. I love it. Well, hopefully for those that are listening that may not be on Adaptive, we can solve you some frog kissing, or prevent it rather.
Yeah.
And you can just march our way and talk to Aimee too. We have a ton of happy customers. But
Yeah.
no, Aimee, I appreciate the time. I thought this was great. And I think it's definitely a conversation that needs to be reiterated and leaned in. The blocking and tackling can't be emphasized enough. If you don't
Yeah.
have a strong set of codes and you're not looking at your financial statements the right way, that's going to impact a lot of different aspects of the business, including billing. So
100%. If you don't know where you've been, you don't know where you're going. Mm-hmm.
bang. I love it.
Yep.
We'll end on that note. Aimee, I appreciate you so much. And let us know if we can do anything for you.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
You bet. We'll see you, Aimee.